All right.
Okay, good afternoon. This is Jeff McMahon, and I am the Gear Grant Coordinator for SEL at the University of Indianapolis. This is Results Matter, the counselor's role in collecting, analyzing, and sharing data. Today, our guest is Dr. Danielle Duarte, as a recent graduate from the Harvard Education Leadership Doctorate Program and co-author of 2 books. Hatching Results for Elementary School Counseling, and Hatching Results for Secondary School Counseling. Formerly a school counselor, counseling grant project director, adjunct facility member, director of professional development, and president of a state school counseling association, Danielle continues to train counselors and administrators in developing comprehensive, data-driven school counseling programs. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Danielle, to the session, and we'll get started.
Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here virtually with you and talk to you about the counselor's role in collecting, analyzing, and sharing data, which I will say is very near and dear to my heart, which you will hopefully learn about very shortly. So I know I just had, thank you for such a nice introduction. Just like was said, I just finished my doctorate in education leadership, and my work was actually in a school district in the Austin, Texas area, where I work to support increased equity and advanced coursework for students. So when we think about AP classes and dual credit classes and such, really work to try to see how can we dismantle some of the barriers that impact especially students of color. I've written a couple books and just am really passionate about the profession of school counseling. So excited to talk to you today. So our objectives for today is, by the end of our presentation, being able to explain the importance of measuring and sharing school counseling program results, being able to differentiate between different types of data aligned with the role of the school counselor, and then using a lot of resources that I'm going to share with you to create future school counseling results reports in ways that are fun and engaging for other people to utilize. So let's get started. I wanted to start with this, even though my presentation is focused on the results of the school counseling program, wanted to help us start by thinking about the difference in the school counseling role. We have changed from the term guidance counselor, which unfortunately we sometimes still see, but to this idea of a 21st century comprehensive school counselor. And for you to think for a minute, what is the difference between those 2 roles? I'll give you just a second to think about what that might look like. When you think about, you know, your grandma's guidance counselor versus the school counselor, this is a long list. We won't go through all of them, but this idea of moving from reactive to proactive. In the past, you know, guidance counselors or counselors served some students like the highest need and the highest performing, and the kids in the middle didn't really get any support from counselors. Now working to serve all students, focusing on academic, college career, and social emotional. And this is the big one we're going to share and focus on today, is thinking about outcomes of what services we provide. So not just about what we're doing, but how is our work different, or how is our work impacting students, and how are they different as the result of our comprehensive counseling program. So to also kind of frame our role and better understand why results matter, is the American School Counselor Association has a model, which is a framework for helping us design our comprehensive program. And what you can see is there's this portion right here. The bottom really of the model, it's like the foundation of it, is called Define, where you're thinking about the student standards. What do we want students to know? And what do we want what do we as professionals need to know? And within our professional standards, I will say it talks about using data. So that's an important component of our role. We then move into the delivery system, what we're providing to students, and then the management system is how we're coordinating it. So in terms of classroom lessons, you know, intentional interventions for students, in terms of thinking about referrals and such, these are all important components of our role. And then how are we coordinating it? This idea of us not being, you know, whatever happens that day is just what happens, is having calendars, having goals, having a mission statement. And if you notice, these arrows go up from define to deliver and to manage. And then they go up into assess, because again, we want to think, what are ways that students are impacted? And so this is through thinking about program assessments, results report, looking at our data over time, and appraisals and such. So this is really where we're going to focus today in thinking about our assessment of our program and how we can also share our results with others. And I will say too, the last piece is that the purpose of the ASCA model is to help us actually do more school counseling rather than less. I think sometimes people think, well, this is a lot of work, to do all these action plans and create calendars. But yes, and it helps make sure that we are intentional about our work and that we're able to be thoughtful in the way we're coordinating it and delivering our services to students, rather than it just being this like rapid flow. And sure, you all counselors know of, kind of revolving door of crisis and or crisis management. And instead, this is trying to be very thoughtful about our program. So the other thing that's important to think about when we consider results and how we're delivering our program and ultimately then measuring it is that the counselor's role in multi-tiered systems of support. So we often in many of our schools, we're hearing about multi-tiered systems of support, which is, it came from this academic instruction component where it should be RTI, response to intervention, and then this behavioral component, which often is PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and support. What we think about for us as school counselors that's missing, if we think of our three domains, it's academic, social emotional, but the domain that's missing for us in a multi-tiered system of support is the college and career domain. And so how can we measure and provide services in that domain? Is a new model came out by Dr. Trish Hatch, which is the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support that does include this college and career component. And I'll say tomorrow I have a couple more presentations that are deeper dives into multi-tiered, multi-domain systems of support. So I won't get into all the details, but really felt like it was important to frame this presentation and talking about results to make sure we were really clear about what the counselor role is and what results we should even be measuring, and understanding that it's in these three domains: academic, college career, and social emotional. So all three of these areas, and thinking about this idea of what's the tier one, the prevention and services for all students, and then what's in tier two and tier three, and using data to help us identify and then ultimately measure the results from our work. All right, and just a quick plug, that actually tomorrow, Dr. Trish Hatch, who co-wrote the first and second editions of the ASCA model, and she is updating the use of data in school counseling book. This new book is coming out, I believe, in the fall. She has a talk tomorrow at noon. And so just wanted to give you all a plug because there'll be more on data and all this tomorrow too. All right, and one last piece related to ASCA and MTSS is that they go hand in hand, because the delivery system, or deliver, is performed, the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support is the delivery component of the ASCA model. Okay, so now let's jump into the results, now that we are clear about our role and understand what we're doing. So think about this, think on a fist to 5. What's your comfort level in collecting, analyze, and sharing data for your counseling program? So a fist would be like not comfortable at all, basically 0. And that's okay. All the way up to a 5 is where you feel very, very comfortable and you've done this work before, and any number in between. And so in addition to that number, writing in the chat also reasons that you believe it's important to share your counseling program results. So I know there's only a few of us on right now, but I'll give you a minute to put this in the chat. What are what's your comfort level right now? And then what are reasons to share? All right. See if anyone's able to put anything in the chat. Give you another few seconds to type anything in. All right, well, hopefully you're here because you're wanting some more information. And so thank you, Jennifer. A 2 or 3, understanding that data collection is important, but not sure what to do with it. Oh, I love this. So we can make sure that we get your questions answered. And this idea of like, what do we do all day? Yes, absolutely comes up, because I think you're right. In the role of a school counselor, every day sometimes can be kind of just, it can be a revolving door, and sometimes we want to try to think through what we're doing, and again, how we're making an impact for students. Perfect. Thank you so much. So and I think I will just also mention in the comment that you had said is also helping other people for us to understand, but then also helping be really clear about our role to others, especially administrators, school boards and such. And so thinking about that is really, really essential. So I wanted to start with the Hatching Results conceptual diagram that was also completed by Dr. Trish Hatch. This is a really helpful way to think through data and how, we as school counselors can think about using data, just like Jennifer, you were asking about, and also once we collect it, what do we do with it, right? And Jennifer, also, if there's anything else you're specifically wanting to, feel free to put it in the chat. Like if you have specific data that you're wondering, okay, you've collected it, but now you don't know what to do, feel free to put that in the chat or even unmute and share, so I can make sure to support you specifically too. So as I walk through this, the first part of the data is the process data. So this is the kind of the who, what, where, when, why, what we're doing. And usually we're collecting this for curriculum, like lessons that we're presenting, and for intentional interventions, often group counseling, but there can be other intentional interventions as well. And you'll see the arrows go, I'll explain the arrows a little bit in a minute, but basically this is, what we're thinking about, and it's called either process data, or ASCA has recently changed it to called participation data. So often counselors stop here, right? Sometimes we think, okay, well, we've, led 6 lessons this school year in these different grades, and we've, saw this many students within this month. And sometimes we stop right here. And here's where I encourage you to think about how can we go beyond just what we're doing for students, but to think about what are the attitudes and competencies that students are gaining from our role, and what's the outcomes, the achievement related and the achievement data that's aligned. And so the perception data is what are the attitudes, skills, and knowledge that students are gaining from our work. So if we're creating a lesson and presenting it on, being respectful on campus and allies to one another, we want students to believe, for example, that, it's our words matter and impact the feelings of others. We want students to have the skills to be able to know how to report a situation if they are, if they or someone they know is, being bullied or harmed. We want them to have the knowledge about maybe different types of bullying so that they can understand what that is. So these are the competencies or perception data. And then what we're hoping is behavior change will happen because of this, right? We're hoping that because more students are feeling safe at school, attendance goes up. Maybe discipline referrals go down because less students are bullying or impacting others. And then we also connect it with achievement data that is GPA, graduation rates, anything that's specific to actually students achieving academically, right? And so the arrow goes to the right when we think about classroom lessons, but it goes to the left when we think about intentional interventions. And the reason for that is because with intentional interventions, that's when we actually look at the data. We cull the data to see, okay, any student with multiple Fs or any student with multiple behavior referrals, what is the attitude, skill, and knowledge that they might be missing? So for example, a student who is struggling with their GPA, is it because of their mindset, or is it because of a skill deficiency where maybe they're really struggling academically? Those are really 2 different interventions, right? And then that helps us think through the type of intervention we provide. So I'll give you a couple more examples, and also I'll pause to see if people have questions in a second. So for counseling curriculum, here's an example. And this is a real example that I used to, when I was a school counselor at middle school, that we used to do, is that we had students who, all of our 7th and 8th graders received a Grades Matter lesson in October. It happened during their math class, and it was about 45 minutes long. This was the perception the process or participation data. We then did some pre-post assessments with our students to help them. We wanted to see, do they believe it's important to check their grades online weekly? Do they know the promotion requirements for both grades, but especially 8th grade? So, it's such a crucial year. And can they actually do it? We went in, this is back before kids had one-on-one technology, but we went in the computer lab with them, they actually practiced it. And so we measured these skills, and then we said, do we see a behavior change? Do we see that homework completion has gone up? Do we see that more students are having a higher GPA, that fewer students have D's and F's? This was an important component. And then what we did, this was, again, we did this lesson in October, and then about a month later, in around November, when it was progress report check time, we then we looked at our data, and we looked at students with multiple D's and F's. And these were our groups to think about if they needed an additional intervention. So we looked then back, and we said it was kids with 2 or more F's or 3 or more D's or F's. We did a 2-part grade check workshop. So it happened during lunch, and we did it in the computer lab. And what happens was students would go, the first time they would come in, we talk about, grades matter, again, kind of a reminder. We'd have them write a postcard home to their family and a goal for improving. And then we'd have them check their grades online and write missing assignments. And what we wanted them to know was, again, their grades would impact them in the future. They knew the benefits and consequences of a low GPA or getting F's. And that a skill was that they could actually find their missing grades online, and then looked and measured to see, did students improve? Were there fewer D's and F's from the student group? And I'll share that data, those results later. But just this is how we walked through and thought through our hatching results conceptual diagram. So I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions about this. And especially Jennifer, I know you talked about, you collect a lot of data, but aren't always sure what to do. Didn't know if you had any specific questions related to this this model of collecting and analyzing data. I'll pause for just a sec. And again, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. And I'll put it back to this slide. Let me go this way. Oops, this one, which is the overview slide. Okay, well, I'll go ahead. So hopefully this is that means I'm being very clear. So what I wanted to show you is when we think about results then, and we think about using this model, then, we have all this data, and Jennifer, like you said, you're not really sure what to do with the data, right? And so Dr. Kirchhatch had created the flashlight results presentation, and her idea was this idea of, rather than trying to measure every single thing, and rather than trying to present every piece of data you use, because I think what you said, Jennifer, and thanks for the chat, that it feels like a lot sometimes, is instead to think about how can I shine the light on one piece of the work I'm doing as kind of a spotlight or flashlight to help other people understand. And so what I'm going to show you is an actual presentation from a school. This is a school I used to work with, and and what I want you to think about as you're watching, I'm going to present it. I'm going to pretend like I am presenting it, and you are the school staff. You're my administrators, or the teachers at my school, anyone else who's there, school psychologists and such. But think about, as you're watching it, what are you learning about the school counseling program from this presentation? And at the end, I'll ask you to put in the chat or to verbally share, what have you learned? And then I'll give you resources about how to use this template. Okay. So this is a high school example, and it's a high school that did a GPA calculation lesson. All right, so I'm going to pretend like I am one of the counselors now. All right, so hi, Vallejo High School staff. We're so happy to be talking to you as your school counseling team, and share a little bit about the GPA calculation lessons we've been doing with our 9th grade students. We're going to share our results, and also tell you a little bit about the next steps because of this work we've been doing. So we wanted to start with the mission of our program. So the mission of our program as not just a school team, but as a district team, is to promote and support safe and effective learning environment, where all students acquire the knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed in academic, career, and personal social development to assure college and career readiness, and the skills necessary to be successful in life. And you can see right here, we use the American School Counselor Association model as a framework for developing our program. And the 3 domains we focus on is academic, career, and social emotional. And so while today we're talking to you about more of the academic domain, we also have lessons and supports for students in career and social emotional as well. And so to start with, why did we decide to teach a lesson for 9th grade students about GPA and why GPA matters? Well, we know that beginning in 9th grade, students' grades and grade point average impacts their eligibility to participate in sports, and also, really when we think about the future in terms of graduation and college admission. And so we really wanted to make sure all of our students knew how their grades impacted them, and how to calculate their GPA. That was a really important piece. Research also from the University of Chicago finds that freshman GPA is really predictive of GPA in 11th grade, and connects with if students would graduate and if they would enroll in college. And so again, thinking about the future and wanting to make sure our 9th graders had a really solid start as students was really, really important to us, which is why we wanted to get into the classes and share this important information. This lesson also aligns with our district goals. So we know one of our goals for the district is to ensure that our dropout rate is decreasing as a district. And again, 9th grade is such a crucial year. So we really felt like that if students understand their GPA and how their grades really matter in different ways than they might have previously, this could really help make sure that students are graduating and not dropping out. So this specific lesson is aligned with the academic domain, like I said, and some of the standards it's connected to are the, self-confidence in ability to succeed, and applying self-motivation and self-direction, and engaging in challenging coursework. Our data about what we did for our students is about 430 freshman students received this lesson. It was delivered in October, and the lesson content included GPA calculation, information about college entrance requirements, and requirements also for co-curricular and academic activities, and the impact of also attendance on grades. And during this lesson, students practiced calculating their GPA based on their first quarter progress report. So what did students learn? Well, students believed, and actually even before we came into the classes, almost all of our students believed that grades were really important to them. And so you can see there was a slight increase in students more strongly agreeing, but I think this really signals that our students really care and really want to do well, even if they aren't always doing so well. So I think this is as a school staff. We also asked students if they knew the number of credits that were required to graduate. And so not only about 83% did beforehand, and so we had about a 16% increase, now 96%. And we want to make sure this is 100%, so we're going to work with that last 4%, but this is really important. Oh no, is my audio having trouble? Yikes. I don't know what to do about that. Is that better? Okay. I don't know what was going on there. Maybe I was touching the mic or something like that. All right. Thank you for letting me know. Okay. And then what students know is that we wanted to also make sure kids knew about the probation period if a 2.0 GPA wasn't maintained. And you can see only about half of our kids knew this. And now about 88%. We had a 66% increase. And this was really huge because we know sports is really important to a lot of our kids, and wanted to make sure that they knew and were connected to this information so that it could impact and motivate them. And then we actually had students calculate a GPA to show us. And so you could see only about 37% of the students could do it before, but close to 90% were able to do it after. And this is the example question we gave them, which is really huge. And again, important because we want to make sure our kids know how to calculate their GPAs and then how that connects with them. So when we think about our outcome data, what we did is we looked at our first quarter. The average GPA was a 2.67 for all of our freshmen. And what you noticed is it actually decreased. I'm going to pause for my school counseling role and just say I actually really like this example for a lot of reasons, including that the fact that they didn't just only share all the positives, right? They shared that this is real for us as school counselors. Sometimes we get data that's not quite perfect and doesn't work out, and we might want to not want to share it. But I think what I love is that they did share it and are vulnerable and said, okay, this is what we're finding. And it doesn't mean our lesson wasn't successful, because you could still see there's some really good results they previously had, but it shows that, there's still some significant challenges they need to overcome. All right, so back to being a school counselor. So because we saw that our outcome data didn't improve in the way we're wanting to, we're actually really going to intentionally monitor the GPA overall, but also work with students who are have really low GPAs that are bringing that percentage down, and think about more class lessons that might maybe it's study skills or other lessons that could help our students as well. So some of our summary and implications: close to 90% of our students are able to calculate their GPA. That students really believe that their grades and attendance are important. And despite showing increases in attitudes, knowledge, and skills from the lesson, there was still a decline in the average GPA. We know that some students were absent for the lesson, so we're wanting to make sure that we include those kids, and those students might be some of the ones who are having lower GPAs. So next step is to coordinate with algebra teachers to continue practicing GPA calculation and providing specific interventions. Especially the SART is the student attendance review team. We recognize that there are some students who have chronic absentee challenges. And so this is an important piece for us to address, and that can likely be impacting the overall GPA dip that we're seeing. We're going to keep monitoring the data. And we also, just as a side note, some pre-tests weren't given. There was a class with a sub, so we had some data that wasn't reviewed, but we feel still pretty good about our pre-post data. And finally, we just wanted to thank you, Vallejo High School staff, administration, for being so supportive, especially our 9th grade English teachers who were so welcoming in your classes and helped kids calculate their GPA, and our 9th grade team in general, who's been opening their doors for kids to submit missing assignments and get help. And so we just thank you so much. All right, perfect. So that is a lesson, or not a lesson, excuse me. That is again, a flashlight results presentation. And this is what I always time myself just to make sure this is only about 10 minutes of our presentation. And I share that because sometimes I think we as counselors think, oh, well, I can't present to staff because, I might, there's always full agendas on the staff meeting, which is true. And, 10 minutes, isn't super, super long. And there's even ways you can finagle this and make it shorter. So think for a minute, and I would love for you to put in the chat, what did you learn, or feel free to unmute. What did you learn about the counseling program from this presentation? think about the different slides. What did you all learn? If you were a school staff, if you were admin, maybe a school board, what would you have learned about the counseling program? Yeah, so there's data. So counselors collect results, right? And we connect it to what it means for teachers and for admin. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We're a great resource. The team works together, has good relationships with the teachers. Absolutely. A couple other things that I think are really nice too, that I feel like are kind of like snuck in there, like secretly in a way, but then again, help people think about our role is that, you know, we have a mission. We aren't just making things up exactly. I mean, we are, but we're thoughtful about our creation of our program, right? And so we're using these domains. We have a foundation of a model that we follow as a counseling team, right? And like Jennifer says, like we work well together because we are collaborating in doing this work. That there's research connected to what we are doing. That we're connected to our school and district goals. That we have standards as school counselors. So again, I feel like there's a lot of like subliminal messages in addition to the data that are really great and really help people think through, you know, the fact that that we as counselors are doing all this work, and it really helps, I think, people better understand our role and like you said, the collaboration we have with school staff. And so there are free templates of all of this, and I'll share, and this is, I promise I'm not trying to make you buy anything else, but there are templates on online that you can get completely for free that looks like this, and you can plug in your data and all of your information into the template. And then there's a couple books if you're either at the elementary or secondary level that actually deeper dive into actually planning classroom lessons and thinking through how to align that, again, with pre-posts and then creating flashlight results presentations. So if you're wanting more, these are great resources, but also there's a lot of free information online as well when you're thinking about this. And my recommendation, I think it was Jennifer, where you're saying, you know, you have this data, I'm not sure what to do with it, is choosing one lesson or one intervention. Just so like starting this idea of not trying to do and measure everything, but pick one and think about it strategically. And I like, again, this lesson example that I shared with you with the Vallejo High School was that they were thoughtful about a lesson that they knew aligned with their district goals. So if you know something is really important for your school or district right now, whether it's graduation rates, whether it's you know, social emotional well-being for students, which we know is huge after COVID, choose that one to measure, and then try not to worry about measuring everything else that you're doing, but choosing that one and then sharing the results so that you don't feel so overwhelmed, because I think that sometimes we can be really data rich, but information poor because we just have like all this data and don't know what to do with it, just like you said, Jennifer. So I'll pause and see if there's any questions. Yeah, and thanks, Jennifer, for saying this. And I will say, Jennifer, I'm not sure of your caseload. That's actually in my presentation tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about caseloads and managing things, but I'll just share. I will say that sometimes when I was a counselor at middle school, I was the only full-time counselor. There was another counselor who was there 2.5 days a week, and then I had an intern like 1 day a week. But basically that meant it was kind of like I was the only counselor, because part-time was still really helpful, but you know that just everything gets put on you. And what I'll say is that I think it's still so important to still measure results, and almost even, I don't want to say more important, it's always important, but because then you can actually also share the need. So in this example, when it shows like that there's still this huge need, right? This, I think, can help when teachers are thinking about when you're, maybe asking for students to take them out for an intervention, or you're wanting to have more class time. When you show that there's still a huge need, that can actually help, one, get you, more access to students, but also as justification for why you might need an additional counselor. You can help build this need by sharing some of the not so good data with people. And so just as a side note, yeah, and so can you share about how you collected data for the previous curriculum intervention example, about the teacher provided or even access to the information system? Are you talking about for the intervention, the data, oops, excuse me, this one with the D's and F's? Yeah. So what we did is we, with the D's and F's, we, at the end, what we would put on our calendar every year, while we were planning our calendars for the year, is that we would put the dates when progress report grades were due, and when final, we were in trimester systems, when trimester grades were due. And so right after each grade period was due, we would pull that information from the our student information system, and worked with if you're having trouble accessing that data, working with your either your school administration or district administration, explaining the reason you need access. Because I think sometimes what happens is that people don't always know, again, what our role is, and sometimes they might not give us access to the right, to pull grade reports and such. And so we would pull that, and then we'd cull through it and find kids who had 2 or more F's or 3 or more D's or F's. And I'm gonna skip ahead to this piece. Let me skip this for just a second, because I want to and I'll go back, but is that this result piece here is exactly what you were talking about. So what we found, we had about 800 students, and of our 800 students, so about 400 8th graders and 400 7th graders, there was about 50 that that every kind of grading period, and sometimes a little bit more, would have 2 or more F's or 3 or more D's or F's. And so that's the reason we chose that. It was a kind of a manageable number to deal with. When we chose just 1 F, it was a huge amount of students. And it wasn't that we didn't want to help all those students, it just wasn't feasible with our ratios that we had. And so what we did was a 2-part grade check workshop. And the reason we did this was because, again, even 50 students is kind of a lot of students to figure out what to do and how to, support individually. And so we did a lunch workshop where we basically, it wasn't like a formal type of group. It was we send lunch slips to about 20 kids, and then most of them would come, and we would do we'd show a little motivational video. We'd talk about why grades were important, share about the 8th grade promotion criteria. This was an example postcard we would use where it was like a fill in the blank, and literally we just printed it on cardstock and then sent it home, where kids would say, I'm writing to you because I attended a lunch workshop with my school counselor to check my grades and work on improving my goal this trimester. And we'd help them write a goal, 2 actions I'm going to take, and we'd help them think about how we could connect some actions to their work. And then you can help me. So to whoever it was it checking my homework? Was it checking my grades with me? And then they would sign it, and we'd have our information at the bottom. And the other thing we did that I felt like was, we had them write down their missing assignments. The other thing that was super powerful was, I would call it the evil power of the 0, where I would walk through with the students, and I think especially at middle school, to show them how, you can have like pretty good grades, and then you get 1 0, and how much that drops your grade. And I would do the math with them and show them like on a whiteboard. And I think that was super, super powerful too. And so what we found is that from this, we would do that once, and then about 2 weeks later, we'd call the kids back in, do like a second part, check their grades again. From this 2-part workshop, that there was a huge reduction in the amount of students who had multiple D's and F's. So, and then what allowed us to do with this, group of 21 7th graders and 28 8th graders was that it then allowed us to think more strategically about what they needed. Did they need we did do some 6 to 8 week groups with these students, but now it wasn't 50 kids, it was, 20 and 28. What I will say though, is we then had new kids pop up that aren't in this data because we just collected it from that group of kids. But then there was new students popped up that weren't there before. Then we would do the 2-part workshops. So it was kind of like an ongoing system. And I will say these slides, we shared this, and I think briefly, again, this was maybe a 4-minute presentation to our staff, is that we shared these slides with our staff so that they again knew that we're doing our best to try to support the teachers in all of their work. And we're careful not to say we're taking all the credit, but really just to say, hey, we're helping, and here's what we're doing on our, to best support kids who are getting multiple failing grades. I'll pause and see if there's additional questions for this. And also, just as a side note, that you can, this presentation is downloadable on the website too, that's connected with the conference, that it has all this information. I'll connect if there's any questions. Okay, so let me go back to what I kind of skipped. And so I was sharing there's the free flashlight results templates. The other thing that you can also do is, if depending on how you want to present the results and what you're thinking about, is that you can also present them in ways that are more like a 1-pager. And so when I was a elementary counselor, I collected data in a variety of ways, but one of the things we did, because was we did college trips, and this was for students who would be first. Most of our students would be first generation going to college. And so we did like a little overview that explained, that they went to college. Here's some of what kids learned and what they said. They had to fill out a college application and about why they wanted to go to college. So we put some like quotes here. And then during the trip, what they did. But again, we didn't just stop with what we did. We shared some information about the knowledge, attitudes, and skills that kids gained. And so I made this a little bigger. It's at the bottom, but you can see that the percent of kids who could define a scholarship reported they wanted to go to college. They could list 2 or more subjects they could study in college, and then list 2 or more different types of careers. So only about half could beforehand, and then close to 70 or about 75% were able to after. So connecting this again to some data for what we did. And so I remember presenting this information to the school board briefly, and I did just during open session, which, there's usually, you have 2 or 3 minutes, you can just go and present. And I just shared this with them and gave them a little handout. And so I didn't have official presentation like the flashlight, but this is another way you can share some of your data. And here's one more example from a middle school campus that, to zoom in on the top part, where they did share what they did, how many lessons they provided to students and the topics. They talked about the positive behavioral support programs they're running, the parent contacts, individual counseling. But again, they didn't just stop with what they're doing for kids, but they connected it to some of the results. So the total number of group counseling contacts, and then they decrease in F's and D's. And then you can see this here, right, too, where they had the number of F's and D's for their students that they've been working with, and then the decrease. So another way to present this visually, depending on how you want to share the results. And there are also some free 1-pager templates online as well. And these ones are specifically connected with the flashlight results presentation, but you can really, I know a lot of people are actually using Canva and designing, I'm pretty sure the previous one I just shared was in Canva, and are creating pretty creative, nice templates that are sharing data and also the information that school counselors are providing to students. So when we think about data sources, because Jennifer, or actually Kristen, the question you asked about, thinking about the types of data, is really, essential. And so thinking about this and better understanding and kind of looking through your data and what data do you have access to and what might you need to request or get more of? Like, are there needs assessments that you have? I know a lot of schools are using Panorama now, but you might do another needs assessment for your school. Some of the competency data, like a pre-post, what is data in your school improvement plan? If you have programs like Naviance or Zello. And again, you do not need to collect all of this data. So I'm sharing it as these are some options, but don't feel like you have to collect all of it, okay? This is just some options that can help you, one, think about what the needs are, and two, think about, okay, so if I do have this data, then how can I use it and share it? But again, I would say focus on one or two pieces, not all of it. This is just a variety of sources that you might have access to. And again, if there's something you might need, asking your admin or at the district level. And so again, thinking, where might you start? So taking a minute to think through, if you're, you all are here dedicated in the summer, thinking about your counseling program for next year, what are you thinking about measuring or enhancing? Because maybe you already have started, but what will you start to measure next year? I'll give you a minute to think about that and put it in the chat. Might it be for a classroom lesson, for an intervention? Perhaps, I know a lot of schools and districts are really thinking about using their needs assessments, as kids, this is a very different time than we've had before. And so as kids are re-entering schools, better understanding what's going on and doing a needs assessment as kids start in the school year and then later in the spring to see what's going on. What are you all thinking of to connect it to for you personally in your counseling program? Oh, awesome. Okay, so Jennifer, this idea of using your needs assessment and, oh, great, Kristen, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's Kirsten or Kristen, but thinking about the data to use. And so Jennifer, your idea of the needs assessment, this is perfect because I think I will say, it sounds like what you're doing is a really good start. The idea of better understanding students' needs to say, am I going to keep doing what I'm doing? Am I going to change it? Here's a few things. I'll share a few things, but I really want to, Jennifer, especially to show you a couple examples about ways you might want to showcase your data potentially with your needs assessment. So a few ways to think about data is that these are examples from either districts I've worked in or worked in as a counselor, or I used to provide support to counselors in different districts. And so you can see we used to have classroom lessons for our students at the elementary level. We happen to use the program Second Step. And so what we wanted to show is because students are learning more how to regulate their emotions, who are learning about empathy, our behavior is improving. And we found that when we looked at school-wide in terms of citizenship marks of outstanding and satisfactory, you could see those went up. And also this is a different school in district, but we also use Second Step in this district, is that we also had a decrease in behavior referrals. So a few ways we showcased the data. This, I think, is exactly what you're talking about, Jennifer, is, oops, let me skip, is that we used our climate survey data, and I'm not sure how many questions you use and which question you use, but what I would do is I went through, when I was new at the school, I went through to look specifically more for needs, and did share the data with my principal to help him understand kind of the needs that were happening, and made some charts like this that I could show the first time they didn't have the 2 bars because it was just like, this is the data that I'm coming into and here are some of our needs. But then looked like we were really hoping we felt like there was a lot of kids who weren't feeling, we had about 40 kids who didn't, if you look at this, about 40 kids who didn't feel close to people at school. So really working to say, how do we increase this? And what are the specific things we're doing? A lot of kids, only about 40%, like I guess 35% were not reporting that they were happy to be at the school. So wanting to track this and say, here are some of the programs we're helping support as counselors. Here are the lessons we're doing that are connected to respect and connection, and different clubs we're helping support. And then this one about the safety too was really important for us too, is making sure that more of our students felt safe. Because again, it was kind of a high number that we're not feeling safe at our school. And as a side note, Jennifer, I used some of this data previously to advocate for why we needed another school counselor. And we did get another full-time one because I shared the bad data basically, in this idea of bad data being good when you're trying to advocate for extra support. But this was then after we had another full-time counselor. We made sure to continually share our data to show this is why we still need 2 school counselors, because we're showing improvements, but it's because we can deliver more services. And I showed you all this example. And then a couple examples for, graduation, when we think about cohort rates improvement with graduation rates over time. In California, there's something called A through G that are the classes you need to take and pass to apply and attend most California colleges. So talking about that piece. So sharing just, again, some of the pieces that are connected to college and career readiness. And FAFSA completion, and then looking at even results for senior surveys of where students talking about even going to or doing after they're graduating. This is really helpful too. So I'll pause and especially go back. Let me go back to here and see, especially Jennifer, if you have any questions about this specific, because I know this connects exactly with your needs assessment potentially. Or even Kristen, if you're thinking about how to partner in using data too. What you might want to do, Jennifer, as you're potentially typing, is that I will say kind of playing around with either Microsoft PowerPoint or Excel and doing graphs. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with creating bar graphs and such. Sometimes that's gotten me stuck. And before, in terms of creating graphs, but over time, I've been able to kind of just get better at doing it. And so hopefully that can help. And I would say, I'm guessing your needs assessments, I don't know, but usually needs assessments have like 40 plus questions, right? And so what I would say is just selecting the ones that you think are most relevant and creating into graphs, because I've gotten myself into the, I sometimes get really eager about data, and then I have a gazillion things of data and I think, oh my gosh, like that was not the best to try to measure and analyze it all, but pick a few questions, because you can see there's like 3 questions here. I think maybe I selected about 5 or 6 to share with my principal that I felt like were either the most that had really good information that he might want to see, or for my superintendent that would be helpful for her to understand, and rather than trying to make graphs and charts for everything. And yeah, and that's okay. I think that hopefully a next step with this idea of, that you said you might be keeping it to yourself. I imagine, again, that's probably not intentional. That's just what you were doing, but thinking about ways to share it. And another thing we had done in my previous school, and I'll share in the last few minutes, is we would share this type of data, and we would actually share it. We would have some student focus groups and ask kids to tell a little more. Oh, thank you, Kristen. We would have kids, we would share these slides with them and say, hey, look at, like, you know, we're seeing an increase in kids feeling close to people at school, but still there's some kids who aren't. Like, how are you feeling? What do you think reasons are that students are feeling these different ways? And I will say talking to kids is one of the best things to actually ask them and engage them in this data, especially in areas of concern, because they are just so honest and open usually about what's going on. And so, you know, bringing kids in from different backgrounds, from, you know, I think like sometimes you have like your ASB kids, but then your kids who maybe are struggling, and those are the ones you really want to hear from. And is so great to talk to and ask them about this information. So I know I've been skipping around a little bit, but with that, I hope that we're now here. The objectives from our presentation was being able to explain the importance of measuring and sharing counseling program results, being able to differentiate between the different types of data, and using the resources to create results reports in whatever way we feel like most supports our students. And so yeah, I'll just end and see if there's any final questions, or and here's my information, and see if there's anything else that you all might need. And otherwise, I will wish you all a good rest of your day, but I'll hang on for a few minutes and see if there's anything else. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. Oh, and good. Yay, Jennifer. I'm so glad. Please reach out if there's anything you need, and hopefully the resources online help as well with you getting started and feeling good about everything. So yeah, thank you. All right.
Yeah, all right.
Great. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I know it wasn't heavily attended, but hopefully it was, people still liked it. Who came?
Yeah, well, they're recording all of them.
Oh, great.
Oh,
perfect.
And